So this new upload schedule is going to have videos on Wednesdays and Saturdays, with the first and third Wednesday of the month being a podcast. But obviously that is not what this is. It did not feel appropriate, it didn't feel right, it didn't feel genuine to be posting a podcast right now. So instead, I would like to have a very frank and honest discussion with my non-Black viewers right now and open up a conversation for all of us in the language community to be having together. This video is going to be a start of a discussion and a place to begin looking for resources, but this is not going to be by any means an end-all be-all. Obviously, I am not the kind of voice that we should be amplifying right now. I am simply a white person who is learning along with every other white person right now. I will be the first to admit that I don't know as much about racism in the United States and racism around the world as I should, and I'm working on that. And similarly, while I would love for all types of voices to be represented in the discussion that I'm going to open up, this video specifically is going to be directed at my non-Black viewers. I've said this before on the Polyglot Progress social media accounts, but I really want to say it again here because I know a lot of people aren't necessarily on those social media accounts, and I know that in posting this there are going to be people that question why I am not just posting normal language content or addressing this very briefly, and why I felt like I had to film a whole new video for today. As people who have followings online, we all have a responsibility to get involved in things like this, but especially those of us who run social media accounts, who run YouTube channels, who run blogs dedicated to the joys of learning about languages, learning about cultures, and experiencing the world. It really is our job, our utmost responsibility, to be standing with those who are fighting for equality and take a stand against oppression and injustice. What is happening right now is not just a political issue in the US. It is a humanitarian issue that all of us as global citizens of a global community need to care about. And I'll talk about this more later, but beyond that, this is not just an American issue. So as someone who really strives to create a place that provides free educational resources, I want to help provide some of these resources. I want to open up a place where you can go to begin to start your research. Like I said, it's not the end-all be-all of all resources, but it is at least a place that those of you who have not started yet can start. And I also simply would like to open up a discussion within the language community about the language community, because although we are a online community that is so invested in diversity and culture and the world around us and connection and communication, we have a lot of work to do right here within our own community, within the things that we do and say online, within the things that we do and say at events. And that is one way that we can all help this movement, is by starting with ourselves and starting with this community that we share together. As a general place to start, we all need to be educating ourselves. We are a community that grew out of study and diversity and education, but I'm going to guess that a lot of our own study and education has not extended to race issues. Most of us have probably not taken the time to seek out and then to read and to watch materials that is specifically dedicated to the history of race issues and also to the process of becoming anti-racist. Maybe because we haven't thought about it, maybe because we have been meaning to and have just watched other things or read other things, maybe because we feel like we don't have to because we're not racist, maybe because it's hard and it's uncomfortable to read material that calls us out on things that has been happening all around us our whole life, or that we've been doing forever and haven't realized is unintentionally perpetuating these issues. And so now is the time to start. The first step in this needs to be educating ourselves so that we can move from being not racist, or honestly maybe a little racist, to being actually anti-racist and actually creating actual progress and change. I'm going to put links to a whole lot of resources in the description. Some of them will be Google Docs and master lists of books you can read, articles you can read, TV shows and movies you can watch, podcasts you can listen to, etc., that are a great place to start beginning to understand these issues and understand how you can work to combat them. Take the time to read and watch these things. Educate yourself. It's going to be hard. You're going to feel called out on things. You're going to feel bad about stuff that you have been doing and have not realized is bad. Or maybe even that you have realized is bad, but it feels comfortable, it feels normal, so you just continue doing it. But there is no way to create change without first changing ourselves and making ourselves educated so that then we can help change others. I will be the first to say that I need more education on race issues. I am a white person. I do not know firsthand what it is like to be black, and education is the only thing that's going to get me to the point where I can almost kind of picture what it is like. I also grew up in a predominantly white area that also did not really teach much about the history of racism in the US. We skimmed over a lot of things. We glossed over a lot of things in history class. Pretty much everything I know currently, I've had to learn on my own, and I still have a long way to go, and I know this. If you're in the same place, it is fine to admit that you do not know much about race at the moment. The thing that is not fine is if you then choose to not educate yourself further. Like I said though, this is not just an American issue, so learn about American racial history, learn about what's happening at these specific riots and why these specific riots are happening, but then take a step back, look at the history and the systemic racism in your own country if you're not from the US. Learn about it for the cultures of the languages that you are studying. If you are learning about a country while learning a language, you cannot just learn about food, about clothes, about the glossy, cool parts of history. You have to learn about these other not so glamorous aspects of the culture. We as a community of language learners need to start to understand and to study the parts of culture that are not glamorous, that are not fun to talk about. We need to start to understand and to look at colonization. We need to look at sexism, at racism, at all of these things that we don't like to talk about as a community and that we don't like to think about or study when we're learning a language. We cannot just pick the cool and glamorous and fun parts of culture to learn about. If we are truly going to learn a language and are truly going to learn about a culture of a country or multiple countries, we need to understand the bad parts as well. The next step after you educate yourself is to begin to use that information to educate others. This can be as seemingly small and simple as calling out your racist uncle at dinner, or telling your friends that something that they're doing or saying isn't helping the movement, or in the case of our online community, calling out influencers and commenters and bloggers and things when they say something that's a little racist or when they're silent on issues like this. Calling someone out or getting called out is not a personal attack. It is letting someone know that they have done something wrong and something harmful, and then hopefully, if you are the person getting called out, being receptive to that and receiving that and using that to be better as you move forward. If you are someone who feels like you are still feeling upset and personally attacked when someone calls you out on something like this, I really recommend taking some time, as well as educating yourself, to just step back and begin to understand why that is and how you can move past that. Again, I am not perfect, and I want to make that very clear in this video as well. I am coming from a very similar place as a lot of you probably are. It took me up until quite recently to really reach a point where when I am called out, I do not feel feelings of fragility, of guilt, etc. And I am solely able to feel grateful that someone took the time to let me know what I did wrong and receptive to using that to be better. It is unfortunately a natural response that we have, that we do not want to feel like we did something wrong. And as white people, if you are a fellow white person, you carry a lot of white guilt and white fragility that you're just not aware of, and it makes it very hard to be called out on things like this. But again, it all starts with us. So it is our responsibility to look at ourselves and see, am I responding with shame? Am I responding with guilt? Am I responding with counteracting what a person says when they're trying to call me out? Am I very defensive? And learning how to get past that so that we can become better. And it's also our responsibility to call people out when we see things like this happening. As hard as it might be to tell a family member, to tell a friend that they're doing something wrong, as hard as it might be to message someone who you follow on Instagram or on YouTube, etc., and tell them that something they said is potentially very harmful to people, can feel very difficult. But as non-Black people, it is our responsibility to keep these people accountable and to help encourage others to begin educating themselves as well. We are a community based around speaking and using multiple languages, and this can only be used to our advantage here. We have the opportunity to read more materials, to watch more things, to be able to educate ourselves further than anyone else. we have the opportunity to speak to so many more people and to get a grasp of so many more cultures and their own race issues that it is more than anyone else's our responsibility to help tackle these problems. While educating ourselves and educating others is the responsibility of the online language community, I would also just like to start a discussion about some things that I have noticed within our community and ways that I think we could also be better. For one, I would like to see us as a community amplifying the voices of Black creators and language learners more. For a community that prides ourselves on diversity and worldly knowledge and worldly interest and that sort of thing, the most well-known bloggers and YouTubers kind of all look the same. It really is our responsibility as a community to create a space where Black content creators feel comfortable posting things online and feel comfortable joining this community. And then it is also our responsibility to be supporting and consuming content made by these creators so that then they can help be some of this next generation of well-known bloggers and YouTubers and Instagrammers and whatever platform. Similarly, I would like to see more diversity at conferences and events in the language community. This is in terms of both speakers and just attendees, but I think really a great place to start would be with the speakers. If the reason that the speakers at these conferences, at these events, is not being as diverse as it could is because the call for papers, calls for speakers is not being met with as diverse a group of applicants as we could have, I hope that the organizers of these events, of these conferences, will look into how they can become a space that is more appealing and more welcoming to people of color. I can guarantee you that there are Black people studying languages and coming up with amazing ideas for talks and things. So if they are not being selected, why is that? And if they are not applying to be selected, why is that? And again, I don't have the answers for that, and I'm hoping that that is something that we as a community can begin to discuss. The next two things that I'm going to talk about could be contributing factors for the reason we're not seeing diversity on conference panels and we are not seeing as much diversity among the top bloggers as we could. The first thing is that as people who are making blog posts, YouTube videos, whatever, about becoming polyglots and about learning all of these languages and having it be this super cool thing that we get to do and super cool ability that we have after we do the studying, that is something that we are able to do because of privilege. Much of the world is multilingual out of pure necessity. Countries that have been colonized are often multilingual out of the fact that they'll speak their country's original language and then they will also speak the colonizer's language. But for people like me who are from the United States and are multilingual because I can be, because other people are just assumed to learn English at this point, it's purely a thing out of privilege that now I can study all these languages and have it simply be a choice that I've made and something that people think is cool and exciting. And while I genuinely do believe that it is totally important for as many people as possible to become multilingual in a day and age where it is so pushed for just everyone to learn English and to have this be the mono language of the world, I think we all need to recognize the fact that this could be a reason that many people do not feel as comfortable becoming a part of our community, and one way that we could maybe work to make the space a little more welcoming. And again, this is one that I struggle with because I don't know how we fix this. I don't know how we both encourage the cool and funness of learning a new language while also accepting that many people do not have this as a choice. I just think there is so much privilege in the fact that we're able to study multiple languages for fun, and in many cultures around the world it is just how it is, and it is not something that you would start a blog on because that's just how it is. So how do we balance the two? I don't know. On a similar note, in the United States and potentially other countries, I will say that I'm a little bit less educated on how funding for school systems works in other countries. But in the US, schools in predominantly Black areas are often very underfunded, and that does not bode well for language education. There are going to be many students who go through the school system in America and are never exposed to learning a second language, who may never realize that learning a second or third or fourth language is something that they are passionate about, because they're just not given the opportunity to find out. I have seen some discussions online about the defunding of language programs in the United States, but I haven't seen that many, to be completely honest, not as many as we should be having, and I don't think I have seen a single one tied to the fact that in the United States there has been a history of segregating people of color into certain areas, and then those are the schools that are underfunded. And it needs to be talked about, because as I said, if we have areas where there are predominantly Black people not learning about language education, how can we then expect to have any Black people making content about language learning on here? I know many of us have this view that either we were bad at or we really disliked language learning in school, but we can't ignore the fact that that is where many of us were exposed to the idea of learning a second language for the first time. As a community, we absolutely need to be having discussions about the funding of language education, and we also absolutely need to be pushing for accessible language education in schools. And if you know any resources or organizations that are working to counteract the problems with underfunding language education programs in the United States, I would love to see them. I did a lot of research on this previously, and I have not really found that many organizations that are really working to bring language courses to schools that need it. There are definitely charities that are working to provide better education to certain areas, but I haven't really seen anything that makes a point specifically that they are teaching languages. On a similar note, I do know that we have begun to have discussions on minority languages and on different dialects of English and that sort of thing, but again, not enough. I think we need to be talking more about the way that language prejudice and language discrimination exists in all of these countries, and how that is often tied to race as well. It felt scummy to me to start up the Polyglot Progress Book Club again right now, but I am adding a lot of books that are going to be focused on things like minority languages and dialects and linguistic prejudice and that sort of thing, as well as I will actually go and look for some more books on education and language education and funding for that in the United States as well, so that we can read that. I think that the Polyglot Progress Book Club could be used for a lot more when it restarts than simply books on languages and language learning. I think talking about issues that the community needs to address and education as a whole and that sort of thing also aligns perfectly with what it is, and is a great opportunity to learn things that we might not really usually be learning. So I know I only skimmed the surface in this video, but I really just wanted to start to open up a discussion to the community at large, because it is everyone's responsibility to talk about this, but it is especially our community's responsibility to talk about this. We're a group that cares so much about education, about diversity, about culture, about the people of the world, and connecting and communicating with them. And so it is our responsibility, more than anyone else's, to work to make this world a more welcoming place. And it starts with us. It starts with confronting and educating ourselves on things that we have internalized. It moves on to working within simply our own community on eliminating factors of inequality and eliminating microaggressions within our own community, and working to be a more welcoming, a more accessible place for everyone to be a part of. And then it continues past that to working on making the whole world at large more equal and more welcoming for everyone. Like I said, I will have resources for education down below. I will also include some places to donate and some places to sign petitions. Outside of that, I really would like for this video to start a discussion. So I would really love to hear from you in the comments on ways that you think that this community as a whole could improve ourselves. If there are things that I didn't touch on that you think are also factors of inequality in the community, I would love to hear them. If you have potential solutions, I would love to hear them. If you have ways you would like to share that people can get involved, go ahead and link them down below. Just anything you can contribute to help keep this discussion going would be great. I'm going to return to posting normally scheduled Polyglot Progress content on Saturday, but I want to make it explicitly clear that once that starts, once normal posting begins again, this discussion doesn't end. I'm still going to be reading and replying to every comment on here, still continuing the discussion in that way, still making sure that there are no comments on this video that get crazy out of hand, still bringing up all of these points in other videos, in future conversations with people, still thinking about other ways where inequality is present in our community and ways that we can fight against it. And I really encourage all of you, once the frequent posting on Instagram, once the YouTube videos, once all of these trends connected to this movement end, it is so important for all of us to still be having these discussions and to still be educating ourselves and still be thinking and talking about everything that's happening right now, as well as all the things that maybe we're not talking about right now but should be talking about. So yeah, I will be back with another video on Saturday, but until then, let's talk about this stuff, let's educate ourselves, let's all work on being better. Black Lives Matter.